Terence Crawford comprehensively outboxes Canelo Alvarez and reveals the truth about his style and recent form. In this video, we're going to be analyzing how Crawford made it such an easy fight for himself, why Canelo was not able to hurt or get to the naturally smaller man, and the truth that this performance has revealed to us all. Terence Crawford is now the first ever three-weight undisputed champion of the world. An absolutely incredible performance, an incredible feat, and what makes it even more incredible is that he skipped a weight class to do it. Everyone said he was going to be too small. Everyone said he would not be able to handle Canelo's power and that he wouldn't be anything up at 168 pounds, and yet, here we are. And this win really does reveal something to us about Canelo Alvarez that I'm going to be getting into in this video, all before we speculate on what's ahead for both fighters. Hello everyone, and welcome back to A Guy Called Henry. Well, I am very excited to hear what you all thought about that. Terence Crawford has just completely outboxed and beaten Canelo Alvarez. And you know, after these fights, I always sit down and I always think, what's the main thing we've taken away from this? What's the main thing that we've learned? And for me, it's very, very clear. I'm going to get into it in this video. So the idea for this one is going to be, as ever, we're going to discuss the fight. We're going to look at what some of the pre-fight ideas were, debates and things that we weren't sure about, what actually happened in the ring, and what we've taken away. Just before I jump in, don't forget to bang a like on the video if you do like it. We managed to nail the prediction in the end, so hopefully that's worth a like. Do subscribe to A Guy Called Henry if you're new, and get your comment in the comments section below. What did you make of the fight, the performance? Also, guys, one more thing you could do for me is please hype this video. It's a new feature that YouTube has. I'd love to see how it impacts the video performance. So I think you get 3 each. If you want to use all 3 on me, then absolutely brilliant. I'd love that. So hype the video up. The option should be somewhere down below. I think it's a feature that's been made available to some people, not everyone. But yeah, bang the hype button. Another thing for me to say. Brilliant. Anyway, now, as I say, you know, I did manage to predict the right outcome. Terence Crawford on points is what I went for in the end. But you all know, if you watched my prediction video, that it wasn't with any great certainty. And that's because, and I said this in my pre-fight video, this fight was a true 50-50 in prediction alone, because there were so many unknowns and intangibles, namely about Terence Crawford, but also Canelo Alvarez coming into this fight. How would Terence Crawford perform up at 168 pounds for the first time in his career, skipping middleweight entirely, coming from 154 pounds, where he'd only had 1 fight? So in reality, this is a welterweight who's moved up, 3 weight classes, which is absolutely insane. But how would he deal with the extra weight? You know, would he do it well? Would he be strong? Would he still be fast? Would he have the stamina to move around the ring? How would he handle being punched by a much, much naturally bigger man? And indeed, with Canelo Alvarez, we had questions about him. Had he slowed down a lot? How did Terence Crawford compare to his recent opponents? Had he slipped too much, or would he just be too big and too strong for Crawford? Well, we got all the answers emphatically in this fight. And like I say, there is something I now understand about Canelo to be true that I predicted before the fight that I think was bang on, and I will get to that. But I want to take you through the fight first, the technical details I saw, how Crawford was able to marshal Canelo in the ring, because don't make any mistake about it. When I first saw them standing there next to each other, just as they were made to touch gloves, Canelo looked absolutely huge, you know, sort of twice as thick as Crawford, in my opinion. Crawford, the longer reach and the taller man ever so slightly, but Canelo looked really big, and clearly there'd been further rehydration since that ceremonial weigh-in. Well, to my eyes anyway. That was the first thing I thought, was just how big Canelo looked. But as soon as the fight started, it became very clear to me that Crawford had the right game plan. He came out boxing southpaw, and he stayed in southpaw the entire fight. I made a whole video about stance and how I felt that orthodox was an interesting look for him in this fight, but ultimately he stayed in southpaw, and the reasons for that were clear. The technical and tactical advantages it gave him in the game plan he needed to implement just suited southpaw so well. The main elements of this fight for Terence Crawford that he utilized and that southpaw allowed him to utilize in particular were controlling the fight with the lead hand, with the jab. He was constantly playing with Canelo's lead hand, jabbing over the top, using that lead to get around Canelo, and he always had the exit. I showed you before the fight. The big thing with Canelo is, and it was always going to happen from time to time, and then that came to whether or not he could deal with the size, but the thing you have to stop with Canelo is him getting his lead foot outside your lead foot. Because when he does that little double flicker jab, he gets you to the rope and then he unloads on you. And for Crawford, it was essential that he was able to exit out to his own right-hand side, so move in a counterclockwise direction. And by going in southpaw, it's a lot easier because you can get your lead foot outside his. And if you're doing that, there's always an exit route. And interestingly, what this led to was Canelo constantly throwing the lead left hook to try and cut this off. And when he did get his foot to the outside, that was an option. But over time, Crawford, as he always does, as the genius boxer that he is and is able to do, starts to find those counter punches. And there was 2 counters in particular that I noted during the fight that I felt were absolutely key for Crawford. The first was the counter off that left hook to the body. Now, Canelo did land these sometimes. That left hook he throws, the lead left hook, is quite unpredictable. but he started to land it quite effectively to the body from time to time. But what Crawford was doing was he was catching it with his elbow, and then he'd throw the straight left hand back at Canelo as a counter shot. He'd throw multiple shots. And what I really loved about his counter work was he'd never throw more than singles or twos or threes. He never got carried away. He never did too much with Canelo. Don't get me wrong though, Canelo was still defensively very astute in this fight, but he simply didn't have the foot speed to get to Crawford. He couldn't do it. And he didn't want to use his own jab because I believe Crawford's lead hand is so effective that southpaw stance really meant he could dominate the fight with his own lead hand. Canelo's not a massive jabber himself, but now that he was fighting someone closer to his size, I thought he might try and implement a jab, but he didn't because Crawford's counters were just too fast and too good. There was a couple of moments in this fight, and I said in my prediction, I thought that you'd see Crawford in moments looking absolutely electric and just outclassing Canelo, looking too fast and lighting him up. And we saw that. I'll never forget the beginning of round 9 where he actually stood in the pocket with Canelo and he just rolled with the shots and he was throwing counters. It was absolutely brilliant. But the second counter that he used that was really effective was he'd allow Canelo to throw that single right hand, that straight right hand, that backhand for Canelo, make him miss and come back with his own straight left hand over the top. I also thought that Crawford stabbing to the body was very good. He'd throw straight shots to the body, and that was something I predicted from the Lara fight that he would be able to do. That was also where I got the idea with the exits that I felt would be useful. And the reason we knew they'd be useful and important was because of Saunders just not really dealing with them too well. You know, Canelo was constantly getting his lead foot to the outside of Saunders' lead foot and going to the body with those straight right hands. And he did land a decent amount to Crawford, but, you know, he wasn't landing enough to win the rounds at all. And defensively as well, you know, I think that for me, Crawford could see everything coming. He could see everything coming that Canelo threw at him. He was reading it so well. His guard was so tight as well. When he was up at the ropes, when he was exiting, looking to move around, he was just taking all Canelo's hooks on the guard. And it was so tight and so safe. He never really looked in any real trouble. Earlier in the fight, there was a straight right hand that Canelo landed, but even that, Crawford took very well. And again, he could see it coming all the way. So he was fine and he was able to move and take some of the sting off it. And tactically, he did all the things, really, that I thought he would do. Even the reverse shots. You know, he'd start with the lead hand and finish... he'd start with his backhand and finish with the lead hand. He'd throw hooks around the guard, and because Canelo doesn't move his head that consistently anymore, it was there to be worked with his guard. I did say that again in my pre-fight prediction. The big question mark for me before the fight, and this is why I predicted Crawford to win. This is how I ended up on it. You have to gamble on the intangibles sometimes, and that's what I did in my prediction. I said that I felt stylistically Crawford was all wrong for Canelo. I felt like he had him. Style-wise, I felt like he had him to a T. I just felt like it would work perfectly with Canelo's style, what Crawford is able to do. So if you think that, then you have to say, if they're the same size, you think Crawford wins. And so then what it comes down to is, can this guy beat Canelo if Canelo is too big for him? No. Okay, so how is he going to do at the weight, at the size? How is he going to put the weight on and put the size on? And people were saying I was obsessed with weight before the fight. There's a reason I was obsessed with weight, because I wanted to study Crawford and understand how much lighter would he actually be and how much would he be able to carry that extra weight. And in the end, yeah, I think I was pretty much bang on. I think he probably was 5 to 10 pounds lighter than Canelo in there, but it wasn't insurmountable. And like I said in my prediction video, or I think it was one of the weight videos I did, there was a 5 to 6 pound weight difference with Lara, but the difference between Lara and Crawford is Crawford can move, maybe not as well as Lara, but he has that sharp counter-punching that most guys in world boxing don't have. Most guys are not as good as Crawford is at counter-punching, and he's super accurate with his shots. And further to the point about the size, the other thing that really impressed me was Canelo could not overpower him. On the inside, in the clinch, Crawford technically had to work quite hard, but technically he was so good. He was able to just stop Canelo from working when he wanted to on the inside. And there were moments where Canelo managed to cut off the ring and get close and get up close and in tight. And Crawford was still doing a great job of blocking those punches, rolling with them, throwing little counters back, making it very difficult for Canelo. And fundamentally, what we saw was that Crawford punches, as I predicted, he punches not hard enough to knock out Canelo or even stagger Canelo, but he punches hard enough to hurt Canelo, like not knock him down, but, you know, just hurt him, cause him physical pain. Canelo was going backwards at times. He didn't want to know. His face was really marked up afterwards. And he had enough pop to keep Canelo off him. That was what the prediction was, that he has enough pop to keep him off him. He's defensively good enough that he can take the sting off those shots. He won't ever really take anything too clean. And every time Canelo wanted to gamble, there was a round, I think it was maybe around 10 or 11, he came out really quickly and Bud just started to light him up again. And the thing was, when Canelo did start throwing wildly, I was saying it on my live stream, he's there to be countered. He's going to get countered. He's going to get hurt if he does that. And that's why he couldn't really go crazy. He couldn't really just absolutely throw the kitchen sink at him, because he'd probably possibly get knocked out. He was really open at points, you know, winging those shots, and the feet just couldn't get close enough to land the shots. And that was what it really came down to. Now, there's a couple things I want to talk about. What was the big thing that I mentioned in my intro that I've learned about Canelo? We have to talk about that. And this was what my prediction hinged around. This is what swung it for me and why I went for Crawford on points. Well, of course, the points came from the fact that I felt he wouldn't be able to knock him out. But the reason I ended up going for Crawford was because I felt that Canelo's decline was actually real. to a degree. And I don't think he's declined that much. I think he's still there. But the big factor in this fight for me with Canelo was the fact that his CV, I don't want to say it's an illusion. I don't want to say it flatters him because it doesn't. He's beaten everyone he's beaten and he lost to who he lost to. But I do think he has, since the losses he had and since some of the tricky fights he had, been selective about who he takes on. And I said before the fight, I felt this would be his hardest fight since Dimitri Bivol, because since Dimitri Bivol, he has fought guys that suit him. And the crux of it is this. Yes, Canelo has been up at 168 for a long time and doing very well. And we said, look, he's the natural 168 pounder. That's why, we think he's going to win this fight. But the reality of the situation was this for me. He would rather be at 168. He prefers fighting 168 pounders because at the end of the day, Canelo is a very, very good counterpuncher. Come forward counterpuncher. He punches extremely hard. And he's a bit quicker than those guys. And those guys have slow, ploddy feet, which means he can get close. He doesn't have to worry about his foot speed issue. But when he's in the lower weight divisions, it was more of a problem for him. He had harder fights, in my opinion, in the lower weight divisions than he has in the higher ones, except for, of course, the Bivol fight. But Bivol moves unnaturally well for a guy of his size. That's without question. That Soviet style is absolutely fantastic. Canelo prefers being at 168. It's easier for him at 168, and that's why he's there. The guy is there not because being at 168 makes him greater. He's there because it's easier for him. And that's what I believe to be true about Canelo Alvarez, and that is why I predicted Terence Crawford to win on points, because I felt that even though he's the lighter, smaller guy, you'd say maybe he couldn't even beat some of the guys that Canelo's beaten recently because it's a different style matchup. But I just felt in this particular instance, Crawford would be a harder fight for him. Stylistically, it was not the right style for him. And I do believe the only reason, I think Canelo knew this, and I do believe the only reason he got in there with Crawford in the end was because of the amount of money that got put on the table. I have to say, look, I'm not one to gloat or brag. I will get predictions wrong. And I'm not glowing at people that got this wrong at all. This was a difficult fight to pick. There was loads of intangibles. I had to take a leap of faith with my prediction because at the end of the day, I didn't have enough evidence to pick really confidently, but I just felt, I had a feeling, an instinct that that was right, that Crawford would be able to handle the size and the style was enough to make up the size difference. But people that pick Canelo, it makes so much sense. I nearly did myself, to be honest with you, because all the knowns were with Canelo being a good fighter at 168 pounds, but I just felt in the end that the difference maker would be the style. And he had enough about him to survive at 168 pounds with the size difference. But the reason that I'm bringing up what people said before the fight was because people need to understand and learn. It's okay to get predictions wrong. There's nothing wrong with getting a prediction wrong as long as your reasoning is right. And people say to me sometimes, why are your prediction videos, 20 minutes long? Because I want people to see the thought process I go through, all the factors that I take into account, all the information that I weigh up, and then I make my pick. The idea is that you all can all do the same. You can look at the information that I lay out for you, and then you can decide if you think my read is right or if you want to make your own read on the situation. A prediction is a best guess. That's all it is at the end of the day. But some people seem to think that you're a casual or you're stupid if you make a pick they don't agree with. And I just hope that the people that were saying that before the fight can look at themselves in the mirror and go, actually, we should probably just slow down and think about things a bit more. I don't think they will, but because that's kind of how you end up in that mindset in the first place. But yeah, I'm not bragging about getting it right. I'm bragging about the fact that it wasn't a bad pick, basically. And again, anyone who picked Canelo to win, totally understandable pick. I don't think it was a bad pick, but, Crawford, in the end, we now know it wasn't a 50-50 fight. It was actually it was a wide win. I can actually show you my scorecard now. My scorecard was 117-111 Crawford over Canelo. And there was a couple of rounds in there. I think it was 1 and 4 that I gave to Canelo. And realistically, I could have given them to Crawford. Round one was very, very close. I think in my mind, I wanted to when it was a 50-50 in my mind, I kind of edged it for Canelo because I felt like it would create a more realistic scorecard at the end. But also, I genuinely thought he won those rounds at the time. But yeah, it could have been even wider for Crawford for me. And one thing I've not mentioned so far is the scorecards. The scorecards were absolutely terrible for this fight. 115, 113 on two of the judges' scorecards. And I think it was 116, 112 on the other judge's scorecard. I think my 117, 111 is as close as you can possibly have it. I don't think you can have it any closer than that. I'm relieved the right man won. I'm relieved it was a unanimous decision, but it is worrying that the scorecards were that close. And again, I've said it many times, I'll say it again. I don't think that the judges should be sat ringside. I think they should be in a glass booth. I think they should be in 4 separate glass booths, or maybe even not in the stadium. But they should be scoring off the feed everyone else is seeing on TV, because I don't think ringside it looks the same. And I think that the TV image you get, the live stream image that you get, is the clearest one you're going to get possible. And you get swayed by the crowd and all that stuff. They should be sat there listening with no commentary. They should just have no sound. They should just be watching. You want to be able to hear the impact of the punches ideally, but if you could find a way to block out crowd noise, that would be brilliant. So that's it in that sense, guys. But what next for both fighters is the question now. I think If you're Canelo Alvarez, I can understand him retiring. I think he probably should. I think the rematch probably makes the most sense for both guys. You know, Canelo's already lost to Crawford once now, so another loss doesn't really matter. He'll make a load more money for the rematch. It'll probably be more like 75 mil. I would guess he made 150 for this one, so if Crawford made 50, that was a 200 million pot. Maybe they get 100 million each in the rematch. I think both men will want the rematch. Crawford certainly will. I think Canelo might as well do it. You know, I don't see where else he should go at this time. And, you know, a fight with Crawford's never going to be one that takes years off his life to the extent that fighting another big guy might do if he's slowed down too much. He might also fancy he can do better in the rematch for all we know. If not that, then Canelo should retire because I think there's nothing left for him to do. He's made all the money in the world and he is starting to slip a little bit, I think, even though I think he can still do a good job against a lot of big guys. But the aura will have slipped too and he could lose again now. On the other hand, Terence Crawford, this was his coming out party, age 37, just about to turn 38. But look, he could have 2 more years in the sport, I think. Mayweather was in his 40s when he finished. I think he was in his 40s anyway. Crawford looked as good as he's ever looked in there, and he was up a couple weight divisions, brilliant. The problem again for him is I don't know who he fights. I think maybe a Charlo brother, one of them could be interesting. I'm sure they're going to try and force Hamza Shiraz down our throats because Riyadh Season love him. I personally don't really have much interest in seeing Crawford against Shiraz. I mean, I would watch it. Of course I would watch it. And Shiraz might be too big for Crawford, but maybe not. Personally, I'd like to see Crawford maybe win a world title at 160 just so he's gone through all of them. But there's no big fights down at 160 for him. There's no one major down there. If Eubank Jr. gets through the Ben fight, maybe he'll fight a Chris Eubank Jr. He may just want money fights now. But I think the Canelo rematch, makes the most sense for Terence Crawford out of everyone. I can't see another obvious route or way for him to go. I just think that fight, the rematch, financially and legacy-wise, I think it is the fight to do again. Because, you know, Boots Ennis is at 154 now, but there is a concern with Crawford now that he's gone up to 168. You don't want to rush taking that weight back off again. Having said that, he fights once a year, so he might be able to adapt his body in that time frame, but I also don't think the money is really there for the Boots Ennis fight. Virgil Ortiz could be quite interesting. I guess I just don't really have a real concept of how famous or big these 154 guys actually are. I don't know if they've got enough commercial pulling power to make it worthwhile for Terence Crawford, because now he's one of the biggest names in world boxing, and his legacy is cemented. I'm delighted for him. The first ever 3-weight undisputed world champion, skipping middleweight to do it. It's absolutely insane. And look, if Crawford wants to stick around, I'll be delighted. I still think he's got plenty left to give. He seemed fantastic in that fight. Even if he wanted to go back and try and unify 154, I just would worry about him taking the weight off. But in terms of the talent, the discipline, what he's got left in the tank, I think it's all there and available for him, and it's a very exciting future for him now. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. As I say, bang your comments down below. I want to know what you thought of this fight, what you think each of them should do next. Please bang a like on the video if you've liked it. By the way, something I'd ask you all to do is hype the video. It's a new feature on YouTube that not everybody has access to, but you get 3 hypes. If you'd hype this video up, I'd absolutely love that. It would be awesome. It's a new feature. I'd love to trial it and see how it goes on my channel. So if you have access to hype, it should be in the options somewhere on this video. I'd love it if you could hype the video up. Do subscribe to the channel if you're new as well. And consider becoming a member. It's a couple quid a month. You get extra perks and all that good stuff. But guys, thank you so much for sticking with me thank you so much for sticking with me through all the build up to this. We've done some great content. It's been great covering it with all of you. And I'm so excited for the next one. I'll be back in Australia this week. Next week? Next week. In the next few days. I'm flying back to Australia. So my content output's going to go up a lot. I'm excited to get back and get consistent again. We'll have no more internet issues. But guys, thank you so much for sticking with me to the end of this video. And as I always say, on to the next one.